Hi, everyone. This is the Admiralty Building. This is one of the symbols of St. Petersburg on top of that spire. And in general, the entire building is because this is the main building of the Admiralty, which is the shipbuilding yard, originally built by Peter the Great when the city was just established, early 1700s. And it looked way more modest than this because this is of the times of Catherine the Great, the second half of the 18th century, but originally it looked like that. So the first ships were built exactly there in the Admiralty, and the Admiralty was located very close to, well, and it still is located to where the Palace Square is and the winter residence of the Romanovs. However, in terms of Peter the Great, there was no winter palace the way we know it nowadays, but it was the city center. And obviously, all around that area, all around Admiralty, people who worked for the Admiralty, engineers, builders would be settling. People of a higher rank would be settling closer in the more expensive and upscale areas, and people of, let's say, of ordinary income and lower status would be settling a bit further on. And we're focusing mostly on the upscale neighborhoods where lived merchants, engineers, a lot of Englishmen, Dutchmen as well, Englishmen, because Peter, not only Peter did visit the Netherlands to study shipbuilding, he spent more time in England than in the Netherlands, and also acquired his skills, multiple skills in multiple disciplines and sciences and crafts. So he did that also in England and hired a lot of people. Originally, Admiralty looked something like that, and it was stone and wood, but now it's all stone built at times of Catherine the Great with certain changes, but it has been the symbol of the city ever since, for sure. And if we are standing here on the English Avenue, English Embankment, sorry, the Admiralty would be in the very end, straight ahead. And the entire embankment that we walked a month ago, maybe a couple of months ago. So over here would be all filled with beautiful mansions, a couple of palaces. Most of them did belong to the Englishmen at some point, and some of them eventually would become embassies, and a couple of them are still embassies, and also now they are offices of some really big corporations or like big public entities. But anyway, so this is the embankment. This is one of the most expensive areas, very close to everything, very close. And as you remember, in the very end of the English embankment, on another island is the big and the new Admiralty. That's because the first Admiralty was very old and it was not meant for metal vessels. But starting from mid 19th century, wooden ships were no longer needed, and there was a big shift towards metal construction, so there was need for another bigger shipbuilding yard. And we will be back to this area, but in the end of the tour, over there is the New Holland Island, which is, as you remember from my previous tours, is a big island where they stored the shipbuilding material. First wood, but later on there would be also storage facility for the new Admiralty as well. And we are going along this new Admiralty to the right hand side on the other side of the river. And over here, this is the beginning of the English Avenue. We have walked almost the entire avenue, just a couple of buildings that I would like to give a bit more attention. In a nutshell, the English Avenue is pretty long, and it stretches uh, across two big islands. So the big city island and a smaller island, and from Moika River through Griboyedov Canal to Fontanka. I know you don't see the mouse, so you just need to you just saw it on the map. And we are approaching the Fontanka River, so we are very close to the end of the English Avenue. And as I told you last time, the end of the English Avenue is much is the quietest part of the English Avenue, and also the most modest. There were a lot of charity houses, charity homes here, a lot of public canteens, several facilities that were supported, that were largely done, mm, I would say, um, mm, yes, supported, supported by the rich people, by different societies. So this was the area where some orphanages used to be. It's mainly due to the fact that there used to be a big church. If you remember, in the previous tour, we spoke about a church that used to be located in the square just next to where we are, but the church was destroyed in the Soviet times, so it's no longer there. But when it was there, a lot of, well, a small monastery, a couple of orphanages, and also um, a couple of other facilities of the charity facilities were opened in that area. So that's pretty much self-explanatory. The building that we haven't talked about last time is this one, and it is still definitely one of the highlights of the area. It's just a residential building. It was a tenant house, like almost all of them in the area. And the house looks quite different from the rest. In this part of the city, in this part of the avenue, most buildings would be much smaller. There are even some buildings from late 19th century preserved, 2 floors, very modest, with no decoration at all. This was like a giant. This is clearly early 1900s and northern Art Nouveau. There's not really a big story behind this house other than just this beautiful dark stone on the facade. And well, when this house was built, people who lived in the area, especially, well, there were a lot of, you know, orphans, right? And there were also a lot of beggars and people of a low, I would say, um, people with needs, and people in need. So they consider this house absolutely inappropriate, and that's why for some time it was not so easy for the landowner to attract uh, the um, uh, the tenants. But things changed quite quickly, and there was no longer any issues with that. The house is, well, it's just to show you there's not really opulent lobbies over there. I guess all the money was spent for the on the facade, and yet it was not a very expensive area to live in. So I guess the landowner just decided not to spend extra for decoration of lobbies. And this is for you to see. So from the outside, it's reserved dark stone, but from the inside, yellow walls, pretty much the same. The courtyard is not so big because obviously the more you build, the more apartments there are, the more money you get from the tenants. That's the idea. But most buildings would look like this, you see. Well, I might have told you the story last time, but I will just repeat it very quickly. In this house, for example, so they also, St. Petersburg was a very international city from the beginning to the end. I mean, to up until nowadays, but we're focusing on the pre-revolutionary period. So there were a lot of foreigners that also lived in this area. For example, Angliyskiy, he came from the from the Baltics. He opened a big factory, that a printed factory, like a printed house, and he won the somehow the an agreement, a contract with the state, and his publishing house would be, his printing house would be printing the tickets for the public transport, for the railroads too. And right now these are rarities, absolute rarities, the tickets. I know people who collect them. You know, there are people who collect stamps, there are people who collect postcards, there are people who collect old public transport tickets, believe it or not. I'm not sure where they found it, but anyway, so the Lublinsky Lane, well, Ljubljana, as I said, international city. So here and there would be different communities settling. We spoke about Estonian community that lived not far from here, where the Estonian church was constructed. It was just a couple of streets, couple of blocks away from here. So in this area, it was a lot cheaper to settle. That area, it wasn't far from the downtown, but now it's just the downtown. But back in the days, it was a little bit of periphery, so it was cheaper, and this is where there was more space to live a little bit more like in your community. So in that's well, that's why streets, some streets here are named after different towns, different areas of the world. Feldoblinsky Lane, let's have a quick look at it. Oleg didn't go too far. He just wanted to show you. Well, I asked him to see, there are some couple of interesting buildings in this avenue, in this lane, sorry. And in most cases, well, the entire avenue is, people don't really come here. I mean, tourists don't really come here. And well, it's just a rare opportunity for me to show you some local gems, and I am more than happy to do that. Well, I have so many plans for 2022, as you know, and I still have those plans. I still came across them as I was browsing through my phone. I had a list of places to take you on a live walks with Hago, and English Avenue was there. Anyway, so you see what it looks now and what it was nowadays. So this is one of the buildings. These buildings, they were part of a small hospital. It was like again, so we remember the church, a lot of charity facilities. So here used to be a small private hospital, and it's just a public canteen where anyone could come in. It wasn't the hospital where you would be uh let's say where they would do surgeries or something, or whenever, so anyone had an issue, minor health issue, they could come there, like as a polyclinics, and get some medical attention, get some medical help. And also they could, people could get there some food free of charge. So that was another charity facility. But now it's an Airbnb. And well, I mean, I think it's still functioning. I'm not sure, but it looks lovely. It looks way better than it was, and it looks like a little bit of Europe, right? With all these red doors, just bright colors, interesting color combinations. And I'm happy to see that the orange building is back to life, because it was in a very bad state. I'm not sure whether people still live there or it's an office, but I really like this house. It's really, really overlooked. It's really underestimated. It's in the corner of the Lublensky Lane. Look at this. So this is a good example of Art Nouveau. Absolutely. There's no symmetry. There are different details. You can't even say how many floors there are. Well, I mean, you can, but you see that there are extra floors as well, and all these interesting decorations. There are photos from the older times, and the house looks way better nowadays. Also, dark stone in the first level. That's clearly local St. Petersburg, Northern Art Nouveau at its best. This is without a doubt. I found my phone. Good for me. And also some photos from the archives. This could be easily from my camera roll. I used to come to English Avenue very often. I like English Avenue a lot. It's much quieter, still beautiful buildings, very different vibe, and no tourists. So I used to spend there quite a lot of time. I miss it nowadays very much. So that house is in the end of the lane, but Oleg didn't go there, so I just included some photographs. And now we are going back to the English Avenue, basically to wrap up the story of the avenue. But there is a lot more to it. And as a little bonus, I have decided to add a couple more things in the vicinity that also add to the vibe of English Avenue and to the stories, and even they are even connected with the stories of Dostoevsky too. As I told you last time, this also happens to be partly the area where Dostoevsky lived, and definitely some of the characters of his works also visited or passed through Now we are approaching Fontanka River. As you can see, there is well, this is where the English Avenue ends, and there is a bridge across Fontanka. And the name of the bridge is very simple. It's the English Bridge. Out of more than 1,000 bridges, this is the English Bridge, and I like it very much. It's small. It's just a pedestrian bridge. No cars can go on the bridge, and it's one of the bridges that, I don't know, reminds me of Europe for some reason. For some reason. But the area is also very interesting. You may have noticed different buildings of the orange color. They originally were not orange, so this is somebody's decision. I like this photo very much. So it's just some random lady and a man in a boat, and the building behind them. That's what I would like to focus. These are very interesting two buildings. Normally, tourists are not taken to that area. So this is the embankment of Fontanka River, Bureau de Expedition de Papier de Tot. Well, this is the Bureau of the Expedition of the actually production, manufacturing of the different state papers, which means banknotes, bank obligations, and so on and so forth, different legal papers for different legal documents, blanks, and so on. So they were printed in this facility. So this is the in Fontanka River embankment, the opposite side of it. And as you probably remember, I told you that up until, well, let's say beginning of the 20th century, beyond Fontanka would be mostly cheap housing and also a lot of industrial facilities. If you take a look at this, I think it's a postcard. I'm not entirely sure, but it was like 1900 then when it was printed. So you see the big buildings with the chimneys. So this is this facility, and then behind it, there's not so much going on, right? So it was built. This facility was actually built in the 1820s. This is how old it is, and it was intentionally built in the very, very, very outskirts of the city for various reasons, for safety reasons, and also for security reasons for the state papers. But nevertheless, things have changed, obviously, and starting from early 20th century, that area started to be developing, and there's a lot of construction going on. So it's now also considered the city, and it's now the downtown anyway. But originally, yes, it was a little bit on the in the outskirts, but still not too far. And since this is early 19th century site, there are tons of, well, there's still a lot of old architecture there. There would be some improvement. There would be some restoration, more buildings added, more buildings rebuilt, that's for sure. But nevertheless, it's still 19th century factory, and there were some illustrations, different workshops producing different papers, envelopes, post stamps, banknotes, as I said, different blanks for banks and different official institutions, well, of all sorts. This is the old postcard. I'm not sure why they would put a industrial facility on the postcard, but that's not the point. The reason I put this not very good quality postcard is because you see also some boats docked from the both sides of the Fontanka River. There would be obviously transportation. There would be public transport, boats, public transport, but they were along the rivers would be sold wood to keep warm. So that was very common. And on this side of the river, not the side with the production side, but on the opposite side, this where they sold wood, and people who lived in the English Avenue would buy wood from here. It was expensive, and very few people would actually ask the delivery of wood. Well, who could afford, they would, but most people would come to the shores and get the wood themselves because they didn't want to pay for the delivery, which I totally understand. Uh, so more photos, another manufacturer side. I have no idea what they're doing. I guess, well, just some big bobbins. I'm not sure what this is for. Later on, further on in the 20th century, after the revolution, the in this site would be renamed into Goznak. Like I'm not even sure how to translate that. So Goznak, this is the name of the site, but as far as I understand, this is not the only place where money is printed. It is also a big facility in Moscow, and also, as far as I understand, not all of them are actually known to public. I guess it's a highly sensitive area, so I guess they wouldn't tell us everything. Yeah, but I'm not sure whether they're still producing stamps, whether they're still producing envelopes of any sort, but that's at least what it used to be up until the revolution. Up until that, if you walk, if you look at that side over there, you will see the blue dome. So this is Fontanka River, I remind you, and the blue dome is the Trinity Cathedral. And this Trinity Cathedral is located in the area where Dostoevsky used to live as well. So the area is called Kolomna. We spoke about it on some of the tours. We even sailed past Kolomna on one of the canals, and we spoke about this area being kind of St. Petersburg version of Montmartre in a way. But um, it's a little bit from a distance from here, and it's closer, way closer to the areas where I take you for Dostoevsky tours. So we are going to explore St. Petersburg of Dostoevsky for several more episodes because there is much to talk about. And at some point, we're definitely going to see this beautiful Trinity Cathedral. This kind of the special thing about it that it has stars on its domes, and locals just call it Starry Dome Church. But as you can see, this photo from the 19th century, the stars have always been there. I'm sure you can see them. There was a big fire not so long ago, maybe 10 years ago, and the dome was really badly damaged, so they had to restore it. But the church has been here since the 19th century, and Dostoevsky himself went to this church, and this is where he married Anna Snitkina, his second wife, who used to be, well, who before that had been his secretary. So you see, um, this is how different areas of St. Petersburg intertwine, and this is how different tours of mine also intertwine. So this is it. This is the end of the English Avenue as it is. We have walked the entire avenue. We've spoken about so many buildings. And you see, so this area in general, and Alec couldn't have found a better, the worst day for filming. I mean, it's not like he could choose, because the weather like this in spring, in well, early spring and or early autumn, it's just as it is. It could be this like for days. And you see, there's not really much to see here. It's pretty much same kind of buildings. Okay, some of them of a different color. So this is clearly one of the quiet areas, less opulent, but many stories because ordinary people, that's where ordinary people live. But to kind of wrap up the English Avenue story, well, even here, so look at this building in the corner. So most of the buildings in this area would be of 3 floors, and they would be of this type, quite unassuming, I would say. So, and to wrap up the story of the English Avenue, I wanted to share with you stories of a couple more areas adjacent to, well, kind of nearby the English Avenue, because they also add to understanding of how this area functions and what there is. So the same story, you see Moika, Griboyedov Canal, Fontanka. By the way, on this last island to the right, you see the square, right? goes like this, and the avenue just intersects the square. So exactly on that square, the church used to be. But we are now back to the embankment of the Moika River, where the English Avenue begins. On the opposite side of the Moika River is this new Admiralty Island. It occupies the entire island, by the way. We're going to talk about it more. So this is the beginning. This is where we started the tours of the English Avenue. And you may remember that just from the side of the English Avenue to the left, there is a big palace. The big palace constructed in the end of the 19th century that belonged to the Romanovs, the one and only, of course. Who else? Who else could this be? So it was built to commission of Grand Duke Alexei Alexandrovich, who was in charge of the Russian fleet for about 10 to 15 years. And well, we've seen two admiralty sites. We've seen the storage site, for the shipbuilding. And Grand Duke wanted to settle in this area to be close to all the facilities that he was in charge with. So that's why he built himself this gorgeous house. Many historians and also different and people of his contemporaries questioned a lot of things, such as where the money for the construction of this opulent house were taken, and why the condition of the Russian fleet was not up to scratch, and why the numerous lovers of the Grand Duke keep wearing new and getting new jewelry, whereas the Russian ships are still using the outdated, obsolete name, what do you call it, guns. Let's just say guns and cannons. Well, this was a good question, but it's not about that. So let's talk about this area to the left from the English Avenue, like the neighboring street. And the name of the neighboring street nowadays is Pisareva, but it's not really that relevant. The name is not really that relevant. What is relevant that we're going to be on the parallel street. Some interesting stories here as well. Otherwise, I will never have a chance to take you here. Kozleninov House. So all these names, these are last names of the people who owned it or commissioned it. So Kozleninov was the member of the VIP lifeguards regiment, horse lifeguards regiment. So they guarded the Romanovs, not just anyone, but the Romanovs. And Kozleninov was also a very big fan of he was very much into horse breeding. Many were in general. So he had a private um, horse breeding facility. I'm not sure what the name is. And when he retired, he created a museum. So he was the first one who created the museum of the history of the life of lifeguards for regiment. And then his son continued. He also served in this regiment, and then also was in charge of like establishing the museum properly, making sure all the exhibits were uh, nicely and correctly done, descriptions and everything. So he was like organizing everything. Kozleninov. And then next to it was a very common practice. So next to the house where the family lived, they would buy a plot of land. Well, if it was possible, so it was possible, they bought a plot of land and build the tenant house. The two very differently looking buildings, clearly of different periods, right? This is the end of the 19th century, the small Kozleninov house, and this is clearly early 1900s, Art Nouveau, local stone, right? Dark stone in the facade in the first two levels, and then the dark plaster on the upper levels. So this is clearly uh, Art Nouveau. The house itself doesn't have any, I would say, special things about it, but it's just to illustrate that very often, okay, it's not probably the it's not like it happened all the time, but whenever it was possible, people, land owners would like to to buy a plot of land if, let's say, their neighbors for some reason decided to move out. And well, it was, I would say, many would prefer to buy a plot of land and then build something on it, or would buy a house and then turn it into a tenant house. That was a common practice, well, whenever it was possible. So that's what Kozlinov did. The house next to it is where the people who um, served Grand Duke lived. So remember the big palace where Grand Duke lived, where the Romanovs lived. So such house had well, it all, well, last time, about 2 or 3 episodes ago, we actually explored it in more details. When we had the first tour of the avenue, we explored it a little bit. We saw some photographs of the interiors. But well, it also had a garden. It was a big territory. It's not just a small house, and it needed people to take care of it. So all the staff that maintained the residence lived in this house, and several rooms were free, and the Grand Duke would just rent it out. That was it. Now the house is residential. As far as I understand, most of the apartments there are communal, still communal. What can I say? Well, right now for us, it sounds absolutely normal, because unfortunately about from 60 to 70,000 St. Petersburgers live in communal apartments. That's a lot. That's a lot. And this is a souvenir from the Soviet times, of course. Back in the times before the revolution, this was still, I would say, a pretty expensive area, because this is the beginning of the English Avenue, right? So that's why there is a big gap between the beginning and the end of the English Avenue. So that was pretty expensive living. But there are some more gems, and let me introduce you to one of the very prominent 19th century architects of St. Petersburg, Victor Schroeder, who was also descendant of the Germans that once settled in St. Petersburg. And he became one of the, I would say, a very prolific architect who had his very own distinct style, a combination of neo-Gothic, eclectic, sometimes with hints of Art Nouveau, that's for sure. So these are the buildings in Russia that you can find by him. He also worked outside of St. Petersburg. Just a couple of buildings. I mean, look at this. Isn't it gorgeous? So it does look a bit like Art Nouveau, but also, well, I mean, neo-Gothic, but also not really. And a bit Art Nouveau-ish. Well, I also know what the interiors look like in this house. It's not even in St. Petersburg, but nevertheless, so it's very eclectic architecture. This is the house that the architect built. He bought a plot of land. He lived in the house next door. We will see it in a minute. And then he built a tenant house because this was the best way to invest. That was it. So people just rented from him. The upper floor was added much later, I guess 20th century, not long ago. Judging by the color, judging by the condition. And that's where Schroeder lived himself. Isn't it a lovely house? So the house that they built would be just behind it. This is the corner building. You may have seen it from the New Holland Island when I gave tour of the New Holland Island, and it's on the corner. And the architect, I think Schroeder did a very good job to place this tower in the very corner and the two symmetrical parts of the building from both ends. And also, Schroeder was more than just an architect. Schroeder was just an interesting uh, illustration of one of the buildings that he worked on. The building is no longer around, but just for you to have an idea, he was also very active socially. He even organized the community, like professional union, not like a labor union, but kind of a professional union of architects and interior designers. He even designed a logo for it, and he placed this logo on the facade of his house. Um, some people claim that, and some of the, I guess those were the architects that were not included in the society that claimed that he was a Freemason, and that society that he put together wasn't really into any building and constructing things. It was basically conspiring against everyone and everything. I found some photos of it. I have never been inside this house. I don't even know what's located in there. Um, so beautiful stained glass windows. So that's just a second. I just want to see the news. I think it's going to be kind of a bit of a drill. Okay. Okay. So no war so far. So Dolly, if you're still watching, there's going to be some drill in the Bikuda Ref app. Hmm. I wonder why, right? Oh, okay. So yeah, and this is the photo I found of the inside. It's this. I guess this is a staircase. The photos are not really fresh. So the photos are from 2000s. I guess this is when the big restoration took place. As far as I understand, it used to be, for at least in the 2000s and 2010, this used to be an office, as far as I'm concerned. But I don't know what's happening there nowadays. So I guess the photo is after that. Well, after that lease agreement was finished. So lovely designs, right, in inside. So I wish I knew what it looks nowadays, and I wish I knew what was going on there. So in general, this is one of the brick masterpieces you can find in St. Petersburg, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. So these tools on the facade are this is the logo of that society of the architects and interior designers that Schroeder put together, and it does look a little bit like Freemasons symbols, right? The triangle, I mean the circle. I don't know. So we don't know whether he was. There's no information about it whatsoever. But it does look a little bit suggestive. I agree. It's not like I'm very much into conspiracy theories, but well, a friend of mine just recently became a Freemason, and it was all over his Facebook, his Instagram. He then texted me saying he has become a Freemason. So it's like a big deal now. Back in the days, well, you kind of kept in the secret. So anyway, so now, if you can see it in the right, to the right from this house, in the right corner of the build of the image, you can see a tower with a spire. So this is the palace of the Grand Duke, and this is um, these buildings were also well, they used to be at some point, the land at some point used to belong to Grand Duke, but later on, after the revolution, all of that didn't matter, obviously. So the Batashov house originally, so this house had been there before the Grand Duke decided to build his castle, palace. I don't know. Just look at the scales and the green area. This is his garden. So I'm not joking. This is a big deal. And but the house had been there before. But the Grand Duke bought the plot of land together with the house. I guess originally the plan was to tear down the house, maybe. I'm not sure. So, but it's named after one of the owners, Batashov, who was also a big engineer, and he was a big he did a lot for the shipbuilding in general in St. Petersburg. So makes sense. But I'm happy that this a good example of classicism in St. Petersburg has survived. So it's good. And just a little more old photographs of what the area looked like. I'm not sure which year it is. It's not in its best. So sometime after the Second World War. So I know that that area was, uh, well, some of the buildings were really directly hit by German missiles. And now this building, as you know, the Palace of Grand Duke partly belongs to the educational facility, the Institute of Physical Culture and Education. But there are also several buildings that belong to the St. Petersburg University. And in general, this section it belongs to, so the biggest part of the area is about the shipbuilding, but a little bit here and there it's about the education. That's nice. And again, there was added a house in the 19th century. The upper floor was added, by the way. The upper floor, it's sometime from the 20th century. So this is the Moika River and the Yellow Bridge. Originally, the original name is not really a yellow bridge, but the Krapovitsky Bridge. It's named after one of the landowners in this area. But let me just double check something. Yeah, okay. But you see the bridge was painted in yellow. This is the kind of a tribute to Yellow Bridge that once used to be located in St. Petersburg. There used to be a yellow bridge, you know, across the Moika River. We have a green bridge, we have a red bridge, we have a blue bridge. We actually had a yellow bridge, but that bridge is no longer there. But it was decided to paint Krapovitsky Bridge in yellow. Let's look at this photograph. So now, so as we know, on the other side of the Moika River, we have the new shipbuilding facility, right? So the new admiralty. And it was built in the 19th century, mid 19th century. That's when they switched from wooden to metal shipbuilding. Just some nice photo of sailors. Well, not the sailors, sorry, the workers of the shipbuilding yard of the new admiralty. And well, there are some nice examples of industrial architecture on the New Holland, on the New Admiralty Island. Have a look. So to the left, it's one of the buildings of the shipbuilding yard, and there is a canal. So this is the photo from early 20th century. The canal, the same bridge, and that's the New Admiralty Canal over there. That would take you eventually to the Neva River. We are very close to the Neva River. The Neva River is just in the parallel street, and right behind. So that's Moika River, and right behind this New Holland buildings, and then the English embankment is already the Neva River. Well, so you see, we kind of made a big round. So we made a big circle. Sorry, we've been around the area. We've made a circle. And now we are back to the basics. We are back to the very beginning. So the area from where the English embankment and the English Avenue kind of stem. But just a couple more stories I wanted to share with you, and I never really had time to do that. So the yellow building there, it's also now part of the educational facility of one of the St. Petersburg universities. But originally it was a plot of land, and there used to be a house that belonged to Khrapovitsky. Well, the bridge is named after him still. However, nobody calls it Khrapovitsky Bridge. We say it's a yellow bridge anyway. Or sometimes we say New Holland Bridge, which is also fine. The New Admiralty Bridge, it's not really fine, but people sometimes say that. But the land changed hands quite a number of times. And then an interesting story happened. So um, Catherine the Great purchased the house for herself and then for Grigory Orlov, her lover. And then she passed away. And the land was given to Paul, their only son. And Paul gave it to his wife, Maria Fedorovna. And Maria Fedorovna, well, she had it in her property. We don't know of much what's going on there during her time. We just know that it was the royal property. And then uh, something interesting happened. So you may remember that Catherine the Great officially had only one son, right? That's Catherine the Great, in case you forgot what she looked like. And that was Emperor Paul, right? But she had several long time, big time lovers, and one of them was Grigory Orlov. And we don't have like paper based proof, but all the historians agree unanimously that there was one more child at least, which means that Paul the First was not the only son of Catherine the Great. And it's not like we know it now, it was known also way before. So there was a boy, Alexei Bobrinsky, who was raised just by a footman of Catherine the Great, basically. And then he was given a plot of land, and at the age of in the age of 18, he would become he would it would be his property in the Bobriki village. So that's why his name is Bobrinsky Alexei Grigorievich, just like Grigory Orlov, right? So everyone knew that it couldn't just be um it couldn't just be a son of a servant to Catherine the Great. So Count Alexei Bobrinsky grew up well, he was given the best education, he was given the best everything, and eventually Paul, who was the only legitimate son of Catherine the Great, he makes friends with Bobrinsky and gives him this palace. I found some photographs. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here, but these are photos taken in this very house. I assume this is already late 19th century since those are photos, and I'm not sure what was going on there in at that time. But in the very end of the 18th and early 19th century, Alexei Bobrinsky was given this house. He was in very good terms with Emperor Paul. I bet Emperor Paul knew everything, and Paul did everything to make his mother angry and turn in the coffin, turn in the grave. So I guess he just did that to make sure she would turn in the grave more. So they were very good friends. They got along really well. And Paul always felt he was lonely anyway. So we know of the tragedy of Emperor Paul. I'm not going into this now. So, but it's just interesting to see how things changed. And so Bobrinsky never really felt he was an illegitimate or unwanted. He always had the best care possible. He had a good money and a good reputation, and he was in charge of a lot of children facilities in St. Petersburg, by the way. So just some photos from the street. And as I said, now it's an educational facility, and technically speaking, it's possible to visit it, and I just would like to see what it's like inside. But so we are already walking parallel to the new Admiralty Channel, right? Oh, canal, sorry, canal. You see it over here. And on the other side of the canal, this is already the new Admiralty. That area is inaccessible. It's closed to public. It's only open to, well, it's a shipbuilding facility. I'm not sure if it's a military fleet, but at least for sure this is the passenger fleet. This is the entrance. And as I already said, it was constructed in mid-19th century. So there are a lot of examples of early industrial architecture there. And just for you to see what I'm talking about, so you see the Neva River, right? And you see the Moika River. So the big Neva River is to the right, and the smaller river in the middle of the frame is the Moika. And that triangular island is exactly the new Admiralty. So the entire island designed to build ships. And when it was built in the 19th century, it was an absolutely top-notch facility with, I would say, the most recent technologies implemented, and it was a big deal. It was a great shift. It was, well, imagine it was just small wooden vessels, and then you could build big metal war machines. I mean, I'm not excited about the word part, but in general, just building something more massive is quite interesting. I have never been to that island, obviously. So these buildings are still there in this or that way, but it's not accessible to public. And obviously, in the recent times, they were in the Soviet times, there were added a lot more buildings, and I'm sure a lot was lost in the decorations and everything. And this is basically it. So we are now walking towards the Neva River, and that's basically the kind of the circle is complete, just like that. The two buildings here, we spoke about them on the some of the previous tours, but in a nutshell, this was, well, originally it was of the two floors. The third floor, the upper floor, was added. I'm not sure when. And you see the building next to it, the yellow one. So we spoke about it. This is where mother of Vladimir Lenin was born. Her family used to live in St. Petersburg, and she was born in this house. But Lenin was not born here, so it's Lenin was born in elsewhere, not in St. Petersburg. But this is where his mother was born, and so when in the Soviet times they went crazy, paying tribute to every site, remembering every site that Lenin visited. So that place was also marked with a plaque. And now that's it. We are back to the beginning, to the place where the new Admiralty Canal meets the Neva River, and the small chapel that is standing on spot of the Church of the Christ Savior on the waters. So this is it. So we have seen a lot of areas related to shipbuilding, and shipbuilding is absolutely fundamental industry for St. Petersburg anyway. So these areas, we kind of completed the circle. We saw areas where a lot of shipbuilders live, where a lot of engineers and specialists lived, and oh well, and it's just lovely to see the area which is absolutely non-touristy. So to me, it's a big deal, and I had a good walk. And thank you so much for helping me get away from the reality a little bit and all the news. Let me share with you what I haven't been able to share. So because I lost my phone, there you go. So just in case, and hi to those who have joined us a little later. So this is the first batch of the links. So two more tours tonight. The next one is in 15 minutes from now. It's going to be Jerusalem, Alexander Nevsky Church. And then after 1 hour break, it's going to be St. Petersburg of Fyodor Dostoevsky. Thank you, Marilyn. So for tomorrow, hopefully, a live walk in Jerusalem, then the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem, and another tour of Jerusalem, that is the International Holocaust Memorial on Mount Zion. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. It's just nice to be able to go back to St. Petersburg, to my kind of a comfort zone. It's still my comfort zone, even though it's not really that much comfort there anymore, but for me it is. So thank you so much for getting my mind of everything. Let's hope for no extreme news. Oh, Dolly, I don't know anything anymore. I'm so done with the news, but it's a good thing that there's going to be a drill on the phones. I mean, it has to be done for sure in the wake of the developments. That's true. Yeah, and by the way, thank you, Mari. And also on my first tour of the day on the live stream from Tel Aviv, in the beginning, I am not going into this now. There's no time, and I don't have energy to do that. I explained why I came here amidst the conflict, and well, just shared with you a little bit of what I've been thinking of, and how I see the situation. So just in case, because I've I've been asked these questions a lot, like why are you here, what are you doing, and what the plan is, and aren't you aware of the situation and everything. So I shared my perspective on that tour. The recording is available, the link is over there. Thank you everyone for joining me. Thank you for your support. Thank you for those who have already tipped, and you know how to do that. And the recording will be shared at some point with you, and you can find it on my YouTube channel. I will see you soon, hopefully in Jerusalem and then in St. Petersburg. And then tomorrow is going to be all about Jerusalem anyway. Bye bye, everyone. Thank you.